Good afternoon. Welcome to Pranzo with Pasquale. I'm joined by the one and only, the legend, Laura Meyer. Laura, thank you for joining us today for Pranzo. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Most people are going to know who you are now. You've been in the industry for probably more than half your life, I would say, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
this year marks 20 years, so more than half
yeah.
my life, definitely.
More than half of your life. But let's start at the beginning. Tell me about growing up in California. What was your childhood like?
Childhood was great. I'm the youngest of three. I have two older brothers, and we just grew up in a very food friendly house. My parents are both trained culinary, but they weren't actively working in restaurants when we were little. But for us, it manifested as home cooked 100% of the time. We never ate out. It was always cooked fresh. It was always cooked at home. It was nothing elaborate, but it was just good quality made fresh from scratch. There was no real jarred anything. It was just everything was made from the beginning. And that was just kind of where it started. And then like I can remember my first memory that they let me cook was I got to bake a cake by myself. And of course, I screwed up some things because I didn't quite understand all the jargon. But it was just they welcomed us into the kitchen. It wasn't like they didn't kick us out of the kitchen or tell us to stay away. It was if we were intrigued, they let us in, and then of course we got to eat the scraps and things like that. And so it was great. And then when it came time for me to go find a job because I was being yelled at by my brothers to go find a job, it just so happened to be at a pizzeria, which happened to be with my mentor for the longest time. But then I just never left. And now we're 20 years later and I'm still making pizza.
How old were you when you had your first? That was your first job, correct?
Yeah,
Huh.
it was I was 16 going on 17
Okay.
and it was one of those my brothers because they were older thought they were, well versed at life even though they were only 2 years older than I am, but because they're military, they figured they knew better. So they were screaming at me to go get a job. And so I went and got two. And one was at the pizzeria, and the second one was at a sandwich shop. And the pizzeria was more fun. So when I had to pick one over the other because I was into college, I picked the pizzeria because it was always more fun. And then pizza just continued to be more fun. And so I stayed.
So tell me about high school. You get your first job, 16, 17. Were you involved in sports in high school? What was high school like
Oh,
for you?
yeah. Sports were my whole life growing up. My brothers, myself, I played soccer, I played basketball. And then I shifted into rowing in high school, mostly because I didn't like to run, but it's the most running I've ever done. and and I stuck with rowing into college. I didn't do like collegiate rowing, but because I my studies took me in a different direction than sports, but I was still able to kind of dabble in rowing alongside like when I studied abroad, I was able to row with the team abroad. I wasn't competitive because I was only going to be there a year, but I still dabbled in sports. I got into long distance running. I just sports and athletics, having a team, I'm extremely competitive in everything. I have learned to kind of keep it to myself. I'm not like outwardly in your face, but on the inside, I'm screaming. Um, and so I love competition in athletics and pushing yourself physically. It lends to pushing yourself mentally. I've learned a lot that have served me in my business. And it's funny because I find myself repeating a lot of the things my coaches said to me to business owners who come looking for advice or they just need to vent and they just need like a like-minded person who's been through it, and I'm like, yeah. And it's like when you find yourself turning into your parents kind of a thing. I have those moments now where I go, oh, I was told that when I was like 12 or 13 in sports. And yeah.
Is there one coach in particular that really resonated with you that you still hear his voice a lot in your head as an adult
Yeah,
now?
I have there's two in particular. There's and one of which I still see. He's kind of followed me over the course. He doesn't live here near me anymore. He's moved away, but we've still kept in contact. He's even come into the restaurant. He's kind of followed my journey, and he was my basketball coach when I was in fourth grade starting. So I was really small, and I knew him. I've just kind of kept in contact over the years, just intermittently. And he's definitely was one. I remember they ran us so much that year that we outran every other team. We weren't great. Obviously, we were what, 9 years old, these 9-year-old girls running back and forth on the court. None of us could hit the broadside of a barn, but we could outrun everybody. And that's how we ended up winning. But I just remember that kind of mentality of like just being pushed, when I feel like a lot of people are afraid to push little girls at that age,
Mhm.
because they're afraid of like how much can they handle, you know, being pushed like the boys kind of a thing, and they weren't afraid to push us, and kind of not necessarily treat us with rough hands, but just treat us like the boys. And so I remember him distinctly. And of course, now his kids are teenagers going into college. And so and I've met them, and it's kind of nice to have kept in contact with him through the years. But there's also another one that he was my rowing coach in high school. And he was another one where, when you're in high school, your mind changes a lot, and you're growing a lot and trying to figure out who you are and, what you're made of. And he was definitely like pivotal at that period of time of figuring out who I was and how far I could push myself, and just knowing also what I could withstand, being kind of not great, but not the worst. And because I was on a very competitive rowing team in high school, and if you weren't the best, you were kind of not taken very seriously. And, for someone who's really competitive, I wasn't okay with that. And so, but he pushed me to kind of like hang in there and keep going. And, it'll be worth it in the end, even though you might not be the top contender. And it has served me even more. And he has said, I think it was him. It was one or the other that I continue to say it now. And they always told me to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think it was rowing. But I say that all the time for business owners. And it has served, and I say it to myself still to this day, that it's okay to be uncomfortable, to sit in the uncomfortable and be okay with it. And so, yeah, sports has definitely been a big part of my life.
So, how does one get comfortable sitting in the uncomfortable?
For me, it was more about like learning composure and learning to be okay with being uncomfortable, and learning to shift the mentality of I'm going to freak out and crumble to, okay, how do I get my mind to work faster towards a solution, and knowing that it doesn't have to be the end solution. It just needs to be a solution for right now. And sometimes it's just knowing how to keep moving so that you don't get stuck in this loop of, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know how to do this, or this like doomsday mentality. But if you keep moving, eventually you will figure it out. And it's okay to keep making changes. Like it's okay to keep learning from choices, but sometimes the hardest thing is making the decision in the moment. And, I see it all the time with, when there's tickets spitting out of the printer or on the board. And I see it more with like my saute line than I do with pizza. But there's always a period when you're in the middle of the rush and you look over at the saute guy making pasta, and there's not one pan on the stove, and there's tickets spitting out of the printer. And it's because he's so inundated that he can't think fast enough. And sometimes it's just put the pan down on the burner, put the oil in the pan. You got to start somewhere. It doesn't mean that you're going to get out of the weeds anytime soon, but you're making a decision towards the end, towards fixing it. So sometimes for me, that's how I explain it to people. It's like, you just got to get comfortable with, okay, you're feeling anxious. you feel like it's the end of the world, but you have to make a decision. Making a decision it's a baby step forward. And so I've gotten a lot more comfortable with that anxiety feeling, whether it's in business or in sports or personal life, and kind of being able to slow my brain down to just, okay, what decision do I need to make right now, and what can I worry about later?
So high school, in the San Francisco area you grew up in, correct?
Yeah, I grew up in the East Bay, so I grew up
Okay.
across the bay from San Francisco.
What is rowing big? Is that like popular in the Bay Area? High school?
Not really.
Okay.
I mean, it's popular in certain circles, I guess. Certain schools and certain clubs exist,
Hmm.
but it's nothing compared to the East Coast.
Okay. You studied abroad. How
I
did you
did.
get to where you got to? Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, I just in high school, I went to a Catholic school kid, so languages were you were forced to pick a language and begin studying it. And so I had started with Spanish, but in my senior year of high school, I was like, I'm kind of over this. And it was the first year that they had started Italian. And so I figured, let's try something new. And I loved it. And that year was the first time I had ever went abroad. I had ever gone to Italy. And so, at the end of the school year, sometimes they do the trips. I think they call it EF tours, but they'll take a group of kids if they want to go, and they'll take them abroad with the parents and the teachers, and you're over there for a couple days or wherever you choose to go. And for some reason my parents let myself and my best friend at the time like continue to backpack after the trip. We were 17 years old, and my and the trip had like gone home, but my friend and I, two 17-year-old girls alone in Italy, just with a backpack, and neither one of us died, which was amazing. But that was like my first dabble into traveling and being somewhere new, not really speaking the language, and I loved it. And just kind of fell in love with the culture, the people, the place itself, and just also the thrill of traveling somewhere new. And so that was like the bug for me. And pretty much from there it was, okay, how do I get out of here, as fast as I can? And so study abroad was like the best thing I could think of that would allow me to kind of, two birds, one stone kind of a thing. And of course, I couldn't just go to a regular program. I had to go to the one where there was no English. It was a small town. Of course, it had to be like the hardest program. I was pretty much an Italian student and treated like an Italian student. uh the hardest program, I mean, the first exam I ever took abroad, the teacher made me cry. Thankfully I held it in until I got home back to my apartment, but it was my first experience also like being tested in the way that most Americans aren't, in the sense of, as Americans we kind of have this, because we're Americans in the way that we grew up, and most Americans never leave, that you don't really get a taste of what it's like in the rest of the world, of what it's like to be out in the rest of the world. And it was my first experience with encountering someone who didn't like me because I was an American. And that was an interesting test of character, of like, okay, I could either crumble or I could just figure this out and keep going. And out of something that is completely out of my control. And so that was an interesting experience, and I'll never forget. I'll never forget it, because for those who don't know, in Italy, the exams are predominantly oral. They're
Hmm.
verbal and in front of the class, and it is the most terrifying experience, even if you speak the language, let alone not really. So it was a very it was terrifying. On
Yeah.
top of being told, I can remember she told the entire class, like, "Oh, we're gonna make the American go first." And I was like, "Oh,
Oh,
okay, here we go." And then
yeah.
being told, like, just because you're an American, you think you can come here and all just like I just got railed. And
Yeah.
but I figured it out and I learned from it and I kind of went, okay, I get it now. Like, okay, I see you. Um, but best experience I've ever had. I was there for a year in a small town. There was little to no English. You learn to sink or swim and survive. And and on top of it, I turned 21 when I was there. So I was 20 going on 21. You know, you're young, you kind of don't care about anything. You know, you put up with a lot for the sake of fun. And I have the best memories and some of the best friends that I made that are still my friends today. And, you know, you pick up right where you left off and you kind of have this commonality of you suffered together. So you're kind of linked for life. And
Yeah.
yeah. And so, and from there, it just kind of coupled with I studied history in college and I was studying the language as well and then making pizza at the same time. And so like I had gone to the pizza competition in Salsa Maggiore the year while I was abroad, and that was my first taste of pizza competitions. And I didn't compete, but I got to go and watch and hang out with everyone and kind of learn a little bit about it. And so when I came back from Italy and then graduated, I was still working at the pizzeria and for Tony Damiani, and then he opened his place in San Francisco and asked if I wanted to move over there. And so when I moved over there, that was like, okay, I want to compete. I want to do all of the things, you know. And
Yeah.
it was slowly like putting together all of these things that I didn't really have a plan for. I just knew I liked all of them, meaning history, like I like to write, the Italian language, the culture, the traveling, the food. You know, I was putting it all together without intentionally realizing it, and so now I've kind of been able to put together all of the things that I love, and I've turned it into a career, which is I mean that's what you hope for a teenager, right? Figuring life out is that they can do the things that they love and make it into a career, and I did. So,
You're a fantastic writer too, by the way. Um,
well, thank
so, what town were you? Well, what part of Italy where you
I
studied?
was in the north. The town's called
Mhm.
Pavia. So it's about 30 minutes south of Milan by train,
Okay.
the slow train.
Yeah, the slow train, not the
Yeah.
not the comfortable train. And
No.
then you went to, and that's when you witnessed your first competition. So, were you
Yeah.
keeping in touch with Tony at the time, or you just kind of went? Who did you know someone there?
No, I was still keeping in touch with Tony because, you know, they knew that I was going to be coming back. You know, it wasn't
Hmm.
like I was moving abroad. I was just going to be gone for the 1 year. So they knew I was coming back and I just had this was, you know, when Facebook was like at its high. And so it was keeping in touch and I had seen on Facebook probably that they were either going to Salso or they were already there. I don't remember the details, but I remember getting in contact with him and he was like, "Yeah, come to Salso, no problem." And then going out there and seeing the competition, kind of getting just kind of a taste for like, "Oh, this is really cool." And I was just there for the day to kind of see how it all worked, and I enjoyed it and loved the hell out of it. And so when Expo came up, when I had, you know, a year or two later, when I was back and the idea of competing, it was, yeah, I want to do this, you know. And Tony had kind of, he never pushed me into competing. He never forced it on any of us. It was, we kind of had to express the interest. We had to kind of prove that we really wanted to do it and you know that he was going to invest in us if we proved that we wanted to really do it. But we had to show the initial desire, and so of course I was like, hell yeah, get me in there. Like, I want to do this. And of course I had the best time ever and just continued to do it. And a couple of the others at work were also competing, and so it was a great time.
And this was, you said you were 2021, correct? So this was in your early
Yeah.
20s. Yeah.
Yeah, this was I started working at Tony's 2009, or no, I'm sorry. no, he opened in 2009. I graduated in 2011. So I started in 2011 at Tony's. I was still at the other shop in 2009. But 2011 is when I started at Tony's. 2013 was the first year that I had won. It was the first year that I competed at Expo. And then my friend actually won his category and I bombed. but then I had gone but then I had gone to Parma 2 weeks later. And then that's where I had won my first one. And then obviously from there it was, the first time not doing well was like, oh yeah, I want to like I got more to prove. I have something to prove. And then winning in Parma was like, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to keep doing this. And then now it's a couple of years later and a couple more awards later and I still love to do it.
But your first was in Parma, correct?
My first win was in Parma, yeah.
What
And
which category did you win in?
that was pizza intella. So that was the pan category. Yeah.
What
And
what
so
did you
and that
make?
was so I actually did a Sicilian in which a lot of people did more of like a Roman in the pan, but I had done a Sicilian and I think for one, it set me apart because it was different from what other people were doing. But I mean, Tony and I still talk about this story because it's the quintessential, like you show up, like nowadays competing, everyone's very well prepared. There's a lot of resources, there's a lot of people you reach out to. But Tony was very kind of like, I'm going to let you do this. And he was going to help if I had asked for it. But I think he understood from the very beginning that, like, if you're going to do this and you want to win, then I can't be seen as helping you really, and I think that it
Mhm.
served him and it served me. And I appreciate that now because it could have gone another way and it could be a totally different story. But I think he understood that from the beginning. And so I showed up with zero plan whatsoever. I had a pan, I had a can of 7-Eleven, and I had like the flour to make my dough. And that's literally all I showed up with. And I can remember he looked at me like I was crazy and he's like, this is literally all you brought? I'm like, well, you know, you kind of didn't really tell me anything else. And because I remember those were like the main things that he said you can't forget. Like you can, and well, it's true. I brought those three specific things and forgot everything else. And so it was definitely a ragtag experience of like just figuring it out on the go. I could probably sense from Tony of like, oh, this is going to be a hot mess because she has no clue what she's doing. She has no clue what she's getting into. And at that time, I was 22 by this point. I had no idea what it really meant um, to compete and then to win. Like, I didn't know what it really meant to everybody else. And like the honor and the ego and just everything that's wrapped up in competition, especially for those who have been competing for 20 years. Like, I get it now. But back then, it was just the thrill of competing. And so I showed up with nothing. We were in the middle of nowhere with very like limited access to things, especially because one of the main days was a Sunday. And so as we all know, everything's
Oh,
closed.
no. Yeah.
And so it was myself that year. It was just Tony, myself, and Jeff Smokovich. And I can remember Jeff being like, who the heck is this chick? Like coming in with no plan. And uh going to a grocery store and just being like, I'm just gonna start putting things together that make sense in my head. And it so happened to be just like very common Italian ingredients. And so it was soppressata, arugula, prosciutto di Parma, Parmigiano Reggiano, and that was it. And for the cheese, I just remember like not having any mozzarella and Jeff Smogovich like graciously giving me like whatever he could spare and having to like blend a million different things that I could find. So the pizza that I serve in my store now is nothing compared to what the winner was because it was just a hodgepodge of different cheeses and it was great. but it was definitely when you really like stepped back and looked at it, you could see how ill prepared I was. But at the same time, like I had to learn how to figure it out. I had to learn how to, make my dough without anything. The story that we all tell today, which is hilarious, and I'm wondering between the three of us, someone has to have this photo. But the only thing I had to make my dough, because it was a Sunday, was the trash can in my hotel room.
Oh, that's
And because
amazing.
I had, and we all know the trash cans in hotel rooms have never seen soap in its life. Uh, so we all took turns washing this trash can in my bathroom, just like trading it back and forth of like, no, 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 we'll give it one more go. Like, no, 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 we'll wash it one more time. and and that's what I used to make my dough. And so it's like the ultimate experience of figuring it out and having the best time doing it and having the best time, and I did. And
Yeah.
so that's what I try and take with me into competition now is, yeah, I'm way more prepared. I know what I'm doing. And so I take that as okay, okay, if I could do what I did then and win, having no idea what I was doing, and now knowing what I know now, I think I can do this. And so, and then, helping other people and traveling, it's the best. And so, yeah, 2013 was the first win, and went back to Expo in 2014, my redeeming year, and I won the non-traditional there. And then there was like a one or two second, third place finishes. And then in 2019, I won the American division at the Caputo Cup in Naples. And then they're all on my show. They're, uh, yeah. And so it's just three first place wins and then a couple other ones. But I love it. I have the best time. I will always say yes to competing if I can.
For an American competing in Italy, is are they welcoming the judges, the Italian community? Do they frown upon us a little bit? And maybe it's
I would
different now, but
say,
I'm talking back then, like your first time.
yeah. Yeah. I would say now it's changed a lot. Um, Back then, not so much. I still get it to this day, but when you compete, you don't really have anything on you. You're kind of just they don't really want you to stand out. They want all of the pizza makers just to look like a pizza maker. They don't want you, there's no sponsorships, there's no
Oh,
specialty tags, there's no flamboyance. They want you to present yourself as the pizzaiolo, the pizzaiola as you are. And so everyone kind of looks the same, and I appreciate that. And then of course you got to wear a hat. So to a certain extent you're kind of like they can't really see you, and the fact that my name is Laura, I have brown hair, I make pizza, and I can I did all of I every time I compete, I do all of my own translation. I don't use a translator, I just speak. And so it might not be perfect because I don't get to use it that much anymore, but I can definitely do pizza in Italian, no problem. But so for the most part, you can't really tell that I'm an American. But for some reason, there's always, I don't know if it's like my last name or something, but there's always something that like a question comes up. And so it happened the first year, and it's happened not every year since, but pretty darn frequently, where I will get through the entire process, make my pizza, work with the judges, go to the tasting panel. You even have like the presenter with a microphone in your face, and you're on a giant screen, and everything's done in Italian. And for some reason, I will walk away from the table, and I'm like one of the few people that will ever get to asked to come back to the table, meaning they've already tasted it. Like at that point, they're supposed to kind of forget about you and move on to the next person. And for some reason, people always will be like, no, 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 bring her back to the table. And it's always, what are you? And it's always, oh, damn it. like, God, it's like, it was almost there. And in the beginning, it definitely felt like I was being judged, not in a good way for being an American. Whereas now I think they appreciate the fact that I present myself as I do. I speak Italian. Like I try and bring some pride to it as like, yes, I'm an American, but I understand where I am. And I understand, I respect where I am and what I'm doing. And so I think, especially now that I'm a little bit older, I think they don't frown upon it as much as they did back then. Because I can even remember even just watching how they spoke to Tony and, being with him. And, I speak more Italian than he does, but he understands a lot. And you could tell that he understood, but he just didn't really know how to respond. And obviously, it's not my place. It's not, I don't have the history like he does. But you could tell that even though he's Tony Gemignani, he's got like the most Italian name on the planet. He's got the history, the culture, the family. He's like the quintessential Italian American that everyone knows and loves. But you could tell that they didn't accept him fully and that there was always a tone to the things that they were saying in the way, like there was always like a snide side to the way that they treated him. And I could see it. And whether or not he would ever say it affected him, and it wasn't like from very specific people, obviously his friends, it's not the case, but I mean in terms of the larger community back then, at least. It's a little bit different now because we're 20 years gone. It's different to see the impact that he's had, and a lot of people respect it. Even abroad, they respect it. But back then, they knew him and they respected him, but not in the way that they do now. And so there was always like a judgment, a critique of like, oh, your name is Tony Gemignani and you're Italian, but you're not one of us. And you could always kind of feel that. And, as an outsider, not Italian, but being in it and being exposed to it, it was definitely an eye opening, like, huh, like, because as Americans, you don't get that experience a lot because when you live in your bubble, America's a giant place and it's really easy to not leave, but still gain exposure to other cultures because we are such a melting pot. And, especially for someone living San Francisco, the West Coast, it's a very international place. It's easy to gain exposure to the other countries, but not really gain the full exposure that is immersion. And so it's eye-opening as a young person to kind of be told you're not all as cracked up as you think you are being an American. And so it's humbling. It's humbling for sure. Yeah. But look at us now.
Yeah, yeah. What about women? Were there a lot of women competing? I
No,
couldn't find anything prior to you.
no.
So
There's
is there
very
any?
few women back then.
Hmm.
Well, and so the competition in Parma is the same competition that used to be in Salsa Maggiore.
So majority. Okay.
They moved it to Parma. I'm not exactly sure why, but I also think the convention center in Parma is a lot larger, so it allowed the competition to expand. But in Parma and also in other Italian competitions, as a competitor, you're always allowed to have a an assistant. And a lot of the times back then, the assistant was dressed exactly like you were, right? Because you're presenting yourself as a team, a united front, you're composed, just all of the things. And so a lot of the times you would see women milling around and they were dressed as pizza makers. But the thing that you had to look for was the baking number, the
Mm,
competitor number. And you never saw it on a female. It was all there were very few. There were some, don't get me wrong, like there were some like Floriana Pastore in Las Vegas. She's been competing forever and she's one of the few people, and because she's as nice as she is, she's very humble. And so she doesn't rant and rave about it, but she was one of the few women that I looked up to back then because she was a force to be reckoned with at that time. And but she was one of the only women. And so for me, I didn't really notice it in the beginning because I was just zoned in, focused on what I was doing. It was all very new. So you're kind of you're not looking at the detail, you're looking at the bigger picture, trying to take it all in, and then people pointing things out. And so it wasn't until the awards ceremony where one, I realized how few Americans were there. And then on top of it, I was an unknown. So no one knew who I was outside of the few people at my table. And then on top of it being a female, and then on top of it being 22 years old, it was like a holy shit moment, like across the board, because it was all of these things. And I can remember that the announcer, so because Italian's a Latin based language and whatnot, the the descriptor words changed depending on if it's talking about a masculine or a feminine. And they presented my first place win. They had said it was a man. They had said the vincitore is, the winner
Mm-hmm.
is, which alludes to it being a man
Mm-hmm.
because vincitore is masculine. And so, but then when he saw my name, he had to go, oh no, it's vincitrice. Like, oh no, it's a female. And then they said my name. And so even then you could tell, like in something that literally took 30 seconds for him to do, it just naturally came out because most everyone
Most.
was male, that little subtlety was an indicator of how few women were competing at the time. And then in addition, in Parma, we're talking like an entire convention center devoted to this competition. And so when someone's name got called, it was like roaring, resounding applause because most of the people at these competitions had been doing it for years. And so you build friendships, you network, and you learn to become a part of the greater community, even the international community. And even though you don't speak the same language as your friends, you all make pizza. So there's a commonality there. And so when someone calls your name to win, it's a win for the community as much as it is for you. And so when they called my name, it was Tony, Jeff Smokovich. There was at the time was also there. So that makes three people that knew me. And then for some reason at that time as well, Bill Oakley was there and Pete LaChapelle. So there were five people that knew who I was, and then one Italian on the complete other side of the convention center. So when they called my name, it was like this woo, and then on the other side, it was like go Laura. It was just this like, and so you could just tell that this was like a hadn't been done before, and so. And after the fact is when I had learned, even from Tony, that you're the first American to ever win first place at this competition, like ever. And then for him as well, that was like meant that he had never even won yet at this competition in anything. And then to be the first woman female as well. And it was just like I didn't really understand the magnitude of it at the time. Over the course of, the next couple years, I really kind of learned like, oh yeah, like this is a big deal. It's like this isn't just winning a trophy. Like this is a lifelong thing. And so now I understand the magnitude, especially now being going on 13 years later, which is crazy to me to think of that. But I still have it's still a big deal. It still means something large. And it's great now to go to the competitions and see so many more women not just on the podium but competing. And at Pizza Expo, they're pushing themselves forward, they're at the forefront, they're speaking, they're doing seminars, there are way more women putting themselves out there, and then of course reaping the benefits from it. But it's so nice to see that there's a larger community, that the community as a whole is way more supportive, just all of the things. And then of course my friends, like Leah Skirto's been competing for years. She's a very dear friend of mine. And she's got some of the same kind of stories. And knowing that it's like we were all there, but we never saw each other, we never crossed paths, and that's how few of us there were. Whereas now there's just so many more, and I love to see it.
How does it feel to be at the forefront of that and to blaze the path basically for all women moving forward?
um I try not to think of myself like that, because I'm just being Laura, and I'm just trying to do what's best for myself. While now that I'm 20 years in, I realize the kind of advantage I had in my growing up in pizza. I had a mentor unlike anyone else. And with that comes a lot of things, meaning I had a lot more access throughout my tenure with him that a lot of other people didn't get. And, while he was blazing his path, I was right behind him, doing the same things and gaining access and learning and the education and the traveling, and not just the education in how to make pizza, but the education in watching him build his businesses, watching him be a speaker and a presenter and a teacher, and learning the foundation of what it's like to be the leader, whether it's just me being the manager in the kitchen, or being the leader of a team that wants to compete, or just the leader of a group that's traveling, and or whether it's being on radio, or it's TV, or it's just teaching a class to home cooks, or teaching a professional class, teaching seminars in front of hundreds of people at Pizza Expo, learning all of these skills that a lot of people don't get the advantage of learning before they're pushed to do it. And gaining that experience has served me tenfold, and it's something that I didn't have to pay to learn. He paid me. And so, because I was working. And so, and now that has served me. And so I feel, for me, if I can give that back to people, then I should. It doesn't cost me anything to educate other people. When we all know at the end of the day, we could all make the same cheese pizza from the same recipe, and no pizza is going to be the same. And that's the beauty of it. And I feel like a lot of people now understand that there's no, like, it's okay to keep your secrets if that's what you want. It's okay to keep your recipes private if that's what you want, but there's no shame in sharing anymore. And
Mm.
especially when it comes to the science, because the science of fermentation is not a secret. It's just some brains put it together faster than others. And so it doesn't cost me anything to share. It doesn't cost me anything to educate other people the things that I learned for free as well. And so I feel like if I can give it back, and I have the time, the energy, and the desire to do so, then I should. And I feel like if I can also find like-minded people who want to do those things with me, and maybe create something bigger and better and more, just create more of an experience for others, then hell, I'll do it tomorrow. Like, I'm all for people who have crazy ideas, because Tony was always the guy with the crazy idea. And it's one of the things that has put him at the level that he has, is he's never been afraid of his crazy ideas. And it's something that I've learned is, if you have a crazy idea, it's not about the idea, it's about finding the people that want to say yes to making it happen. Because the crazy ideas, regardless of the industry, are the ones that change the world, right? It's the internet. Like,
Yeah.
well, came up with the internet, and thinking, like, and the telephone and the light bulb, and all of these things that have changed the world all started with a crazy idea. But you needed other people that wanted to be along for the ride, that wanted to go through the crazy and do it. And so I've learned, like, you got to have a village that wants to do the crazy with you. And that was me with Tony. I was like, every time he came with an idea, and I remember it. Every time he would come into the kitchen, he'd go, "Laura, I have an idea," and I go, "Oh God." Like, Like, okay, here we go.
Uh-huh.
But it was, and it just, but you figure it out. And obviously it takes iterations upon iterations. It could take years, but for me, I'm not afraid of the long game. I'm not someone who needs instant gratification. I'm definitely a long game player. I see the bigger picture and not necessarily like the small things in front of it. And so the people that I would like to surround myself with and that I do surround myself with are usually the people who know the steps before it or to help me get to the big picture. And so we do it together. And I'm all for that.
Yeah, I have to touch back on this though. I'm very, very sorry. Okay, so one time I got a chance to talk to Tony in a master class he was teaching, and Tony's the guy that everybody looks up to now, right? All these younger pizza
Yeah.
makers. He's a global figure. And I asked him, like, who was there before you? And he mentioned Graziano. He was an Italian. He's still around,
Yeah.
and you might know who he is.
Yeah.
But that's who Tony kind of really first saw do the acrobatic stuff. That's what appealed to him,
Yeah.
and that's kind of what opened his mind. And but do you realize that girls look at you as the one that blazed the path?
Um, I mean, I do when people tell me.
Okay. Yeah.
um, and it's not just me trying to be humble or me just trying to push it off because I just think of it as it's like my duty to help educate other people around me. Like I'm not here to gain anything from it. I also am not really interested in the world caring what I had for breakfast. Like I don't really need that kind of vindication. I don't need the world to be staring at me. And so I feel like I'm just here to help and befriend and do cool things. Like I want to do cool things with people who want to do cool things. And so um and it means a lot when people say that to me and when people bring that kind of stuff up because it makes it worth it. It makes it cuz sometimes like even with my Pizza Today articles, sometimes I write them and because they get sent off and they get printed and it just kind of floats up there in the world, you wonder if you're making a difference and you
Hmm.
wonder if anyone is benefiting from it because you don't get any response from it. But when someone out of the blue emails me or has a question or just says something, it's a reminder. It's like, okay, even though you don't hear a constant gratification from it, like it is helping someone. And so thank you. It's nice to know that like it's helping someone. And that's all that matters.
I've read all your articles. Your articles are fantastic, by the way. It does suck when you
Thanks.
put that much time and effort into something and you don't get a response, though. You're right. But I guarantee you, everyone's reading your articles. Um, so let's go back. You come back, you're a world champion, you're a champion, first American, and you go back to work by Tony. Where were you in terms of school at this time? Were you still in school? Were you?
I had graduated. I graduated 2011. And so right after I graduated, that summer is pretty much when I moved over to San Francisco. And
Mm,
then that win in Parma was 2013. So I was already at Tony's for a year and a half to 2 years. And then I stayed on there for 8 years and then moved over. And then all that while, I also was working with the school. I was the administrator for the school that he had, as well
mm,
as teaching alongside him. And then I was pretty much like his right hand. So a lot of the events that he did, I helped him with. I did a lot of traveling with him, and I learned a lot in a very like yeah, it was just overall working with him was the 18 years, but in those 18 years, I learned a lot. And it's it's especially now that I'm a business owner, it's a lot of things that I wish people knew before they opened a restaurant. And it's not just the financials, it's not just how to run the books, even though you really need to know that. Um, but the people side of things, Tony had this energy, he still does, but he has this thing about him that even though people put him on a pedestal, he's Tony Gemignani, you can't touch him. right? He has this infectious nature about him that pushes you to want to be better and pushes you to want to do more and like to keep pushing. And he has this like drive about him. And it's not something that he's not super chatty when he's in the kitchen and in that regard. But it's something that when he's in the kitchen or he has an idea or he's developing something and, just all of these things, it's you want to be right there next to him. You want to be there learning and talking and discussing and, or not even, you just want to be hands in the flour right next to him. And he has that infectious nature that draws people to him. And that's something that I learned about like when you run a business, you need people that want to be in the trenches with you, regardless of what that means. He could be asking you to clean the toilet, but if it means that it's going to get you to the end goal of being a world champ, being a business owner, being a, like then I'll be cleaning toilets tomorrow. Like you got to have that, you got to be able to express that passion. And that was something that was a big key for me, was in not just in my crews that I worked with, regardless of the restaurant that I was in, but it was when it came time for me to develop and build my own crew, not just professionally in my own restaurant, but also in like the crews that I go and compete with, the crews that I do events with, and just all of these things. Is you have to have, there needs to be a linchpin that keeps people together, and Tony was always that linchpin regardless of the idea.
So pretty much you went from being the kitchen, I'm sorry, not kitchen, but the pizzaiola, the master pizza maker to business owner. How is it something? Were you comfortable with that from the get go? Is it something that you
Oh
struggled
no.
with? Okay.
um, I didn't struggle with it in the sense of being in charge, because I knew what it meant to rally a team, be in charge of a team, set procedures in place. Like I knew what that all meant. But when it's your responsibility to carry the weight of every single decision, and not just every single decision, but every single person on your payroll, their happiness and
Mhm.
their ability to pay their bills and just live life, like that was daunting for me, knowing that I was now responsible for the happiness of 25 other people and their families. Like that was a very big it was not a burden, but that was really hard for me in the beginning, because it added a layer of responsibility of, I really need to make this work. Like this needs to be successful, not just because I put everything on the line, but all of these people here are trusting me to pay their bills and all of those things. And also not just pay their bills, but their happiness within the building of, the crew. Do they work well together? Are they being overworked? Am I asking too much of them? But at the same time, are they doing their jobs? Like it's a big responsibility to think, it's not my job to make that sure that you walk in my door happy every minute of the day, but while you are here, are you happy? And that felt like a big responsibility to me. And so that was really hard for me in the beginning. But as I learned personalities, how they mesh, what was the right like mix of personalities. I feel like we're in a really good place now. The crew is really great. They work well together. They are constantly pitching in and helping each other. They all know what they're supposed to do. We're at that point now. We turned 3 in a couple weeks. That we're at that point where we're edging on a little bit of stability. Like everyone gets it when they walk in the door. It's busy, so everyone's making money. They're all happy. Customers are happy. Like it feels good. Yeah.
Those first 2 years are the hardest, but yeah. It's a different
Yeah.
level of pressure, a different level of
Yeah, it
pressure
is.
than you were accustomed to. And a lot of people that I've seen, it's you literally have to switch like from an employee to an employer, and it's a completely different mindset. And how you deal with that is defines who ultimately you become, right?
Yeah, and employees, regardless of their stature, their standing in your company, they literally could be your second in command, and they will never understand what it's like
Mm-mm.
to be in your shoes and the responsibility that comes with. And then also just the little things that you have to do that you don't realize until you're in it. And it's just, especially when it comes to smaller places where they're doing their own books in house, they're doing all of, they're doing literally everything on their own, because whether it's family or it's just a small place or they just don't have the funds to outsource it, it just, when you're responsible for doing every little thing, you don't understand how many things there are until you have to do it. And no one will understand it until you physically take on that role. And it's like today's supposed to be a day off for me technically because the restaurant is closed and everyone thinks I'm taking the day off, but after this I got to go finish my taxes, and then I got to go, like file something, I go to the post office, it's all the things. So, but as a business owner, you're never really, especially a small business owner, you're never really off.
Never, never.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
you give. That's one of the things you. Plenty of perks, a lot of perks, but that's one of the things you sacrifice is you can't just turn that switch off. It's constantly there. Like there's a. Yeah.
yeah, and thankfully we're closed Monday and Tuesday, so
Mm-hmm.
it's easier for me to travel, especially over the course of that Monday and Tuesday, because I go, okay, at least the restaurant's closed, no one's there. I don't gotta worry about people. I can just worry about like the things that I can do on my own time. Like that's just I'm responsible for, and I don't have to worry about it. But yeah, it's a lot. But at the same time, like I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't have it any other way. Like I enjoy what I do. I love what I do. I know a lot of other people get into restaurants for the wrong reasons.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta really love what you do, because the food is the easiest part. It's the hardest part in the beginning because you have to build the menu and there's a lot to it and all that stuff. But food isn't dependent on people, but restaurants are. And you can't control people. So, not ultimately.
No, no, you can't. No. Back to
No,
one
we
thing that
wish
we
we
didn't
could.
touch. Back to one thing we didn't touch on. So, you finally decide that it's your time. You need to do this. You're gonna jump off the ledge, so to say. And I would assume that conversation wasn't easy. I mean, you and Tony worked together for so long. He relied on you, I'm sure, on in so many aspects.
Yeah.
You guys worked so well together. Was it
Yeah.
hard for you?
He knew. Like before I ever said anything, when I started the pop up, he knew like that was my, pinky toe out the door, kind of a thing. And I think, and he knew just, we had been together for so long that he knew my personality. He knew, just as I know how his brain works, like, and his habits and things like that. Like he knew the same about me. So he ultimately knew. And yeah, obviously it was a hard conversation for me to physically say the words, but at the same time, it wasn't a long drawn out conversation. It was more of he knew it was coming. He was happy for me. He was proud of me. I still like, more than anything, I think it was hard because he's my friend, and he was one of the only people or few people at that time, especially, and I would like to think vice versa, that I could openly talk to, and him me to a certain extent. That for one, I knew everybody he was talking about, and vice versa. You didn't have to explain yourself of who this person was, and you could just talk.
Hmm.
And as we all know, like, yeah, there was a lot of things that he couldn't talk to me about because as the owner, there has to be a line regardless of how close I was. And, there had to be a line between us, but there was, he's family at this point. And so we had experienced so many things, and he's seen me at my ugly and vice versa because we've traveled the world together, and he's when you've seen the ugly of no sleep, you're not eating, like all of the things. And so there's a certain amount of like tranquility that comes with having a person like that around, of someone that you can openly express things to without having to explain yourself, and an ease that comes with that. And I would like to think that I was that person for him, and he was definitely like that person for me. And and his humor, and we've have all these stories, and it's very easy for us to just pick up where we left off. And for me, not having him around to be able to do that was hard, especially in the beginning, because as an owner, you can't just talk about everything
Mm-hmm.
to your employees, and then even to your family. Like, you don't want to burden other people with the stress and the anxiety, but you need to be able to let it out, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And he was that person for me, because for one, if I had said it to my family, well, my family is very protective and they just want to fix it, and I'm like, I'm not asking you to fix it. I just need you to listen, and with Tony, it was, he understood, he understands, and he was that person, is that person for me. And so when I do get to see him and we're doing events and do things like that, like, it's easy for him and I to just talk to each other and not have to explain anything. And, you know, we know that like it's a safe space. So I miss that. And that was really hard in the beginning because, as we all
Yeah.
know what it's like to be a first time owner, you're scared all the time. You're nervous all the time. And so I miss that, but I still see him, we call each other all the time. We text message, his wife is a good friend of mine. She still cuts my hair. Like, I'm the godmother to his son. Like,
Oh, I didn't know
I'm not
that.
going
Okay.
like, I'm not going
Yeah.
anywhere. Yeah. He's kind of
That's a
stuck with me now.
That's incredible. Let's
Yeah.
talk about Well, horror stories. So you open up now, right? Over budget?
No.
Oh, good.
Well,
Wow.
I mean, timing. Well,
Mm,
I took seriously the advice that I knew I needed to take. And, in the
mhm.
beginning everyone tells you build your budget then double it. Well,
Yeah.
I took that pretty seriously. And
Okay.
so, granted, it meant that I had to seek out a larger investment than probably people wanted to, because the thought of like carrying that kind of debt,
Hmm.
it's daunting. But I knew that, excuse me, if I could put myself in a good position right out the gate, that it would only serve me on the back end. And that's exactly what I did. In working with the consulting company, they helped me get ahead in a lot of areas where, especially for someone who had the culinary background, had the back of house background, but not necessarily, I wasn't as tight on the front of house stuff. And then even more so when it came to just the physical building, they helped me make sure that I was filing for everything in the correct order
Hmm.
and with the correct timing, which saved me time and money, getting contractors and accounts and, setting up all of the things in the right order. Like, I can remember filing for my liquor license and going into the ABC office, and I just was ready to go. I had all my paperwork in order. I had the check. I literally just had to hand it to the lady. She stamped it, filed it, and I was in there for maybe 5 minutes. But the poor couple sitting next to me was literally getting screamed at by the ABC officer because they didn't know that they were missing certain things, or that
Hmm.
they had to do this before that. And I could see that they were just like trying to hold it together. and they were doing it on their own, and it was probably like a super tiny spot that they were going to open. And just knowing that, like, wow, I really avoided a lot of stress by just anticipating, I knew that it was going to cost me up front to hire the consultants, but it put me in such a good position right out the gate that I've avoided a lot of pitfalls, just in timing and delays and stuff like that. So,
And so now there's 4 different styles you're doing right now, correct? What are you doing
yes,
at the restaurant?
we do New York, Sicilian, Detroit, and Grandma.
What's your favorite?
That depends on the day. Um, I really love a Sicilian. Like, Sicilian is like the thing that I always go back to. I love a good Sicilian slice. I love the fluffy interior texture with the crisp on top and bottom. Like, I love that texture. Don't get me wrong. I love a Neapolitan pizza. I love a cracker thin. I love a good
Mhm.
New York. But for some reason, the Sicilian to me is like, it's the best of both worlds. You get texture, you get soft, you get crispy, you get it all. As opposed to predominantly most of the other styles, it's one texture forward. And so Sicilian's always my fallback. It's what I always go back to.
Well, and it's also the pizza you won your first championship with, right?
Yeah, I love pan pizzas. I love
Yeah.
the higher hydrations. There's so much room to play. I mean, there's so much room to play in any style. You just have to go for it. But I feel like Sicilian to me is one of those. Uh, I think maybe because it's in a pan and I don't have to worry quite as much as, is it round? Is it perfectly round? Is it
Mhm.
the shape? Like, you just slack it out in the pan. The pan will contain it. Like, it's one less thing I gotta worry about, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. And so all styles, are you making 4 different doughs at the restaurant?
We make two different doughs.
Okay.
Yeah. In which
2 a year
that
overtime.
in and of itself is different from when I started. So
Hmm.
it like I'm trying to, just because I have a restaurant and people have things that they know and love, like, I want it to evolve as I evolve. Like, I need to evolve if I want to continue to be happy doing what I do. Like, I need to be able to change my dough recipe a little bit or add something new, or and evolve a little bit, because like, the last thing I want to do is pigeonhole myself into a box and, like, never be able to change anything. So hopefully
Yeah.
my clientele gets that.
I'm sure they will. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you don't want to be like, we have a couple famous, well, and not even talk about the local chains, but like, McDonald's built their reputation on consistency, right? And
Mhm.
always like kind of doing that same thing. I think, yeah, that's important. But someone like you and those true pizza artists, like, there's always this thing that you have to keep on exploring and keep on pushing your boundaries and seeing what you can and can't do. And maybe something makes it to your menu, maybe it doesn't, and it goes out to the world
Yeah.
in other ways, like you said, right? But if you just made the
Yeah,
same
and
thing every day, you'd be bored.
it's boring. Yeah, and think you know, thankfully, I'm an independent restaurant. Like, I can do what I want.
Yeah.
Obviously, I want my clientele to be happy, but I think people understand. I'm there every day. I'm not there all day every day, but, like, I think that for as many people that come in and they go, "Oh, this, like, it's a woman, it's a girl, or it's a young girl, or we thought Laura was like someone's mom," or you know what I mean? Like,
Uh-huh.
there's many people who don't associate me as the owner. Um, when they find out, or they knew already, and they see me and I'm there and I'm working, I think people understand that, like, oh, this is, like, it's an individual, it's a unique, it's not going to be typecasted. There's only one. So it allows me a little bit more freedom to change things and kind of explore the creative side without being typecasted. So,
Thank you very, very much. It was a pleasure sitting with you today. Thank you for sharing so much with us. Okay. I wish you nothing but the best. Good luck with the non for profit Fork the Future. It sounds like a great endeavor, of course. Not surprised. And yeah, best of luck to everything. Thank you so much for sitting with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great chatting with you.